Thanks for that, Rahul. Now, last morning, I noted a study by Gartner that said that cloud computing has evolved from being a technology enabler to now becoming a business disruptor. And that is an incredibly poignant observation. And our next talk is going to focus on the business aspect of cloud infrastructure. Well, while the talk is on, you can also join in on all the discussions on social media using the hashtag ICS21, and our editorial teams are looking out to give away some great giveaways. So hashtag ICS21 is your digital destination through the summit. For now, please welcome Wayne Sadin, the lead advisor for VR Group Partners.
Well, thank you so much, Ashwin. I'm very happy to be here to speak to the group at the India Cloud Summit 21. I know the theme is Reform, Perform, and Transform the Future with Cloud. So without further ado, let me get into it. First of all, I think for an audience that's far away, who am I? Why am I here? That's what we'll talk about. I wrote my first computer program in 1968, probably before some of you were born. I've spent 40 years as a CIO, a CTO, and a CDO, a Chief Digital Officer, in financial services, energy, logistics, and a number of other industries. I've been around. For the last 10 years, I've been advising boards and C-suites, CEOs, CFOs, some CIOs, about digital transformation and digital optimization. And yes, I will define both of those terms in this presentation. And most recently, I aligned with a group called Acceleration Economy as an analyst. So I'll be presenting some stuff over time that we developed together, but for today, this is mine. Why am I here? Well, because I'm old, because I've seen a lot of stuff. I started with mainframes back in the 70s. Think about it. A mainframe computer was a $20 million in 1977 or $78. That's about 80 million US today. A box sitting in a $10 million US building. So you're talking about a building in a box that consists of $100 million worth of investment if you took those dollars forward. Who had mainframes? Banks, insurance companies, airlines, the post office, the government. Small companies did not have computers. Over the years, I incorporated mini computers, local area networks, client server, co-location, outsourcing, and a lot of changes in business and tech into the work I was doing, taking technology to firms. And then I moved from what's called systems of record to systems of insight, which is the modern system. So what do I mean by a system of record? When I started, I had a white coat on with my name embroidered on the front pocket, and I pushed a cart around the building where the bank was with piles of green bar mainframe printout with the little holes on the side. And I dropped off the monthly payroll report and the monthly sales report. This was a system that looked back, a system of record. We stored the information about what happened in the past. And over time, while we still do that, we have now built systems that allow us to project into the future. And so I've spent some time doing that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's how the business has changed in 40 years. And I now teach executives to embrace the cloud, IoT, AI and ML, low code, and so on. And I think it's important. I teach executives to embrace. I don't teach executives to program, and I don't talk mostly to IT people. The goal is to talk to the business leaders and help them understand how all this technology affects them for good and for ill. So we'll start with, since this is a cloud conversation, the cloud changes everything. You're all here because you believe that, I suspect. But let's go back and say, is cloud really new? What are we talking about when we say cloud? Back when I started, we had something called facilities management, FM. That meant somebody else ran your computer for you. You still owned it, but EDS or IBM or one of the other large computer companies ran your stuff for you. Is that different than cloud? I actually have a t-shirt that says, it's not really a cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. I chose not to wear it because I wanted to be a little better dressed. But that's so true. We had facility management where somebody else ran the computer, and we had something called time sharing. I vividly remember in the 1970s, I would get in my car and drive to an office right outside of Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I could then rent time on a General Electric mainframe running an MIT operating system called Multics, which, by the way, is the original ancestor of Unix, which begat all the things we probably use today. So I sat there and rented time on a mainframe, kind of like what we do today, except for the part where I drove in my car and had a typewriter interacting. So when we talk about cloud, we traditionally talk about infrastructure as a service. That's providing the low level of technology bits and pieces that companies run their own stuff on. And platform as a service, which says the vendor will give me database or security or collaboration or analytics or whatever tools built on top of that framework. And then software as a service, where entire applications are run in the cloud. Okay, we got all that. But there's a big problem that I call fake cloud. Executives have heard we're co-locating. We've got a data center. We've got people running stuff for us. I've got hyper-converged infrastructure. I'm not picking on a vendor, but VMware, and somebody's providing a hypervisor. Well, isn't that all cloud? No. There are infrastructure, platform, and software as a service provided in a certain manner. Everything else is fake cloud. And if you're technology people in the audience, be sure to talk to your business partners about the bad things about fake cloud, which I'm sure you may hear about in other sessions. But I just want to make sure everybody's aware that so much stuff that's called cloud today is really not cloud. I do want to highlight one thing here. The move by the SaaS vendors to what some of us are calling industry clouds is truly big. And we'll talk a little bit more about why moving to an industry cloud is important. But I will just say, aligning with a vendor that understands your business, your industry, your geography, and then builds cloud technology to support that specifically can make an enormous difference in your time to market, in your quality, and in your cost. I said the cloud changes everything, but really it changes nothing. The business needs are still what drives our technology. We don't put in technology because it's cool, at least I hope we don't. We put in technology because it solves a problem, which brings me to the question of what do we mean digital transformation? Let's start with my definition. And this is a definition, it's actually going to be published, I think, next week in an Acceleration Economy article. A digital transformation is a CEO and board-led reimagination of an organization's culture, markets, products, customer experience, and employee experience that's driven in part or entirely by the promise of technology or the threat of technology. A couple of points here. What's the first part of that sentence? CEO and board. It doesn't say CIO. It doesn't say cloud. It doesn't say techies. It says CEO and board. And the last word is technology. So yes, there's a technology component, but the key thing is for the CEO and for the board to take a leadership role in saying, what do we want to be? What should our company be in the future? Are we in the business of selling a widget, a thing, an object? Or are we in the business of selling the data derived from that widget or object or product? What do we want to be in terms of remote work? What do we want to be in terms of how we value employee time? Do we want to be a global company? Do we want to sell this product or that product? And then the question becomes, what should the customer experience? In the US, we have Walmart. Walmart offers low prices, 24-hour stores, everything you can imagine under one roof. We have another store, Neiman Marcus. I'm in Texas, so Neiman's is a Texas store. Neiman's is the place that sells $30,000 cowboy hats and diamond-encrusted cowboy boots. It's a very different experience. You don't want to run Neiman Marcus using Walmart approach or Walmart running Neiman's. They're both right. They're just different. What do we want to be? What do you want to be? And then, of course, employee experience. I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but everybody here is quitting. They're changing jobs. They're changing physical locations. Is that okay? Do we want to build an environment where the best people wherever they may be, can work for us. Or we want to build an environment where we all drive into the headquarters. I argue that we want the former. I'm an old New Yorker. I used to commute by subway train and then work on the 50th story of a Manhattan office tower. These days, I don't want to drive in a horizontal COVID tube, a train, to then take a vertical COVID tube elevator and go up to the floor. I'd rather work in a low-rise environment if I have to go into an office. Maybe an office located in a city I want to live in. I'm actually 2 blocks from the Gulf of Mexico right now. I'm not in a corporate office downtown anywhere. Maybe that's what we want. And so that's the key, is executives need to shape the decisions of the company. Now, the digital part becomes the driving of promise or threat of tech. The promise is, hey, we have a robot. Hey, we have 5G. Hey, we have Starlink. Hey, we have, name any piece of technology. And that's the promise. And that's something maybe your CIO or your technology partner brings to you as an executive. Look what I can do. Do you want to do it? Or we have the threat of technology. Look what they're doing to us. And hopefully you're aware enough of your market, and we'll cover that a little bit later, that you are aware of what threats are on the landscape caused by somebody else being able to use technology better than you can. So when you see digital transformation described, if it's automate accounts payable, that ain't it. Let's talk about the opposite. If it's not digital transformation, but it's digitization, what else do you do? And I argue there's a thing called digital optimization. And that means doing the stuff you already do, paying bills, making products, shipping things, but using technology to do them better, to do them faster, to do them cheaper. They're different. I want to say digital optimization in one sense is tactical. It is what I do today to drive costs out, to drive a better customer experience because we're faster, make fewer errors. It reduces my audit expense because when I automate a process, the auditors can check the automation and look at the process rather than test case after case after case that's coming out of an Excel spreadsheet or a handwritten book. So we don't do one or the other, we do both, I hope. And as a CIO, I can drive a digital optimization initiative. I can put RPA in, I can put AI in, I can put data analytics in, and build the organization's change muscles by using technology. And that prepares the organization, my role as CIO, to be able to change and be able to incorporate advanced technology. But if the CEO and the board cannot express a vision that says, here's what we want to be because of technology, then assigning a CIO, and I've been that CIO, the CEO says, hey, you go do one of those digital transformations and tell me when it's done. Those will fail. And that's largely why I'm a consultant, because I get to say those will fail and I don't have to try to do them and fail in the job. So it changes nothing to be in the cloud in one sense, because the underlying drivers don't care if you're cloud or you're running hamsters and little wheels running around. The technology becomes almost irrelevant. It's what you can do with the technology that matters and how you want to shape your company. 2 magic numbers I use quite often, and this will kind of influence the rest of the cloud part of the talk. There are 2 important ratios that I found in 40 years of business. So the first is 80 and 10 and 10. If you look at your business processes, 80% of what you do is the same as most everybody else. They're generic or horizontal processes. We buy, we sell, we make, we ship, we collect, we hire, we promote, we fire. The normal processes that drive every business. 10% of what we do in a company is industry jargon or industry regulations, industry compliance. In the United States, we have HIPAA for healthcare. We have Sarbanes-Oxley for public companies. We also have jargon, what the drug companies call things, what the healthcare system calls things, what the trucking industry calls things are all different. And if you're entering the industry, you've got to know that stuff. The good news is everybody else in the company knows it. The last 10% is company folklore. The stories they tell each other, maybe over a glass of wine, a cup of tea, or whatever, about how we get things done around here. And I call it folklore because it's very different company to company. Every company will tell you, we do it the right way, but two companies in the same industry will do it different. Quick story. I worked for an armored transport company. They carry money for banks and retailers. And they were a 160-year-old company. And they explained how the industry worked. And they gave me the history and they gave me the processes, and I got that. And then I left them and I met people from the number 2 company in the industry. They were younger. They were only 155 years old. And when I was talking to them about their processes, they told me the people I knew from the other side of town were completely wrong. They were doing it altogether incorrectly. And this was the right way to do it. 2 companies, the same business, relatively straightforward business as business goes. And they had different ways of rewarding people, different ways of seeing success. And I'm sure that's the case in almost any industry. So 80 and 10 and 10. Now let's talk about the work of changing those things. I'm talking about somebody that's done many ERPs, EHRs, CRMs, all the jargon that says we're gutting the systems and replacing them. So now we're going to go do some work. It's not 80 and 10 and 10. I maintain the workload as a third, a third, and a third. The first third is the generic stuff. We go to Oracle, or we go to Microsoft, or we go to SAP, or we go to anybody and say, give me your business suite. Whether you're in banking or your healthcare or distribution, research, education, we have products and employees and customers and bills and all that sort of stuff. So that tends to come out of the box. You don't make or break your company by how well you pay the light bill. So we tend to implement that pretty simply out of the box, generic stuff. A third of it is industry compliance. Now, it's not 10%. It's all the accounting rules, maybe for your country, maybe for your industry. It's the privacy, it's the security rules, it's government clearances. So you will spend a significant amount of time on that because it is, while it's common in, say, your industry in your geography, it is still not the normal purview of the Oracles and SAPs and Microsofts and so on of the world. That's your industry cloud kind of stuff. And the last third, and this is the weird one, is talking the company out of doing dumb stuff. Because so often that last 10% of company folklore is we always run that report. And when you drill down, you discover that report was written for an executive that's been gone 12 years. Or we wrote a report because of a law and the law changed, but nobody ever stopped the report. Or we pass stuff from employee A to employee B to employee C, and B is no longer needed. 2 points. I wrote one of them on the slide. I'll mention 2. One of them is called Chesterton's Gate. The English writer G.K. Chesterton, 100 and something years ago, said, when you come along upon a gate in a road, don't just tear it down without thinking. Ask yourself, where did that gate come from? Who spent time and energy and money building a gate in that road? It doesn't grow like a tree. So ask yourself, why did somebody think we needed a gate here? What was the problem they were solving? This was a very late in life lesson to me. For years, I've just been saying, if we've always done it that way, it's dumb. Let's replace it. But recently I did an ERP project and we had to think about why. There were some legitimate things we did in this company, but many of them weren't. But at least take the time to investigate. When you say it's just dumb, why was it done? And what was the motivation? And the other thing I want to comment on is re-engineering. That's a term that got pretty common in the US, probably around the world. And re-engineering to most people meant we're going to improve a process. Or maybe it meant we're going to fire a bunch of people. Well, the original article that defined the word re-engineering, written by Mike Hammer and published in the Harvard Business Review, the title of the article was, Don't Automate, Obliterate. And re-engineering was not talking about doing processes better, faster, cheaper. It was asking the question, what process are we doing and why do we need to do that? And if you read the article, it's fascinating about how two companies handled accounts payable, deciding what they needed to pay with a complicated process. I won't talk more except to say that last third is where you'll spend most of your time in the C-suite, most of your time in the executive area going, why the heck are we doing this? And if you don't win, you'll implement a lot of dumb stuff very expensively. If you do win, the company will benefit, whether you do a new ERP, EHR, CRM, whatever system or not. And so those are important as we think about cloud. Here's why. There is a notion that I want to use called a Supersweet. That is, we buy a SaaS product. It's Oracle. Again, I'm going to keep using Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce, Workday. We get a suite. It does all of the business functions. So we're in manufacturing or distribution or healthcare or banking, doesn't matter. So we've typically bought that suite, and then we've done the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, implemented the vendor's code, got a partner, implemented all that stuff, now implemented the unique stuff for our company. Today, with the enhancements and advances in cloud technology and the billions of dollars of investment, here's what a modern suite of suites looks like in the world. You start with a cloud, SaaS, ERP, or customer relationship manager, electronic health record, electronic medical record system. Great. And it needs to sit atop a modern cloud database. Those of you in the database world know that we have two kinds of databases, typically. We have transactional databases, great integrity, journaling, logging, all sorts of cool stuff, and we can write into it very, very fast. But it may not be that good for querying. And then we have a query type database, a non-columnar database, a NoSQL database. There's lots of names for it. And that's great for doing these kind of ad hoc analytics, but it has not got the kind of integrity features. So what happens is we write to our transactional database, and then every now and then we copy it over to our data warehouse or data lake or whatever we want to call it. Modern databases don't have as many limitations. And so I can have one source of truth for my transactional data that's being written in real time and for my analytic data. And so if I'm sitting on top of that one database, I no longer have to worry about keeping two sets of data in sync. And that's a big part of organizational harmonization problems. Now, that should be sitting on a published and extensible schema. The Microsoft company bought GitHub, which is the open source repository. And they publish the schema for their Dynamics 365 right out there for everybody to download. Why is it important to have an open schema? Well, a third. The vendor typically handles the first third. You got to handle the second and third thirds if you're an IT executive. If I can plug in a vendor product easily through the App Store, whatever they call it, or stuff I wrote or co-developed, my life gets much simpler. And in the world of cloud, where we're talking about doing a change every 2 or 3 months in a SaaS system, it is vital that we build an environment where we can handle rapid change, rapid integration with vendor code, with partner A, partner B, partner C code, with code we develop. So it's vital that we sit on top of an extensible schema that we can get our hands on. And then the product should be built in whole or in part using low code and no code tools. And if you've been exposed to them, great. If you haven't, go get exposed to them. It's the next revolution. And why do I care about that? I've been a CIO for many, many years. And the whole notion that users are off doing what they want to do, creating environments, shadow IT or rogue IT, meant my real company was running on 1,000 Excel spreadsheets plus the stuff that we in IT were developing. We need to move away from that. We can't have that any longer. The data needs to move harmoniously through the system. And low code, no code tools mean I can get my citizen developers, my former Excel jockeys, and my professional developers harmonized. They can work together. I can prototype in the low code tool, turn it over to the pro devs, have them add it, plug it into the ERP, and all of a sudden, we got the same database, the same security rules, the same testing, and I can deliver citizen developer code of a much higher quality and pro dev code much faster. Very, very important in the modern world. And then let's deliver the thing through a collaboration framework. I just picked two examples, Microsoft Teams or Slack, which is part of Salesforce. If I now can put that in everybody's hands, whether they're on a computer, whether they're on a mobile device, whether they're on a VR headset someday, maybe a mental telepathy adapter, all of a sudden I don't have to worry about, does my program run for this subgroup of people who only want that screen or that transaction or that report. And so I wind up in an environment where my distribution of this technology has been taken care of by a vendor. And now let's add, I want to get that from an industry cloud vendor, from a vendor that's embracing the notion that healthcare or manufacturing or financial services or consulting or whatever your business you're in matters. And that's a company that's partnered with industry experts, maybe partnered with trade associations, partnered certainly with regulators and legislators, and they're building that middle third of the work into their product. Because this way, somebody else worries about the change in the law, maybe taxes or whatever. I was in the mortgage business for many years, and we spent about half of our effort keeping up with all of the regulatory and legal changes in the US mortgage market. So our customers didn't have to do that. And now we're seeing it coming up in the cloud world, in the SaaS cloud world. So when you look at these super suites, they are really more than just geeky stuff for the geeks in the room. They allow you to create and maintain with much less effort, much faster, and give the executives what they need to run their business. And so if your CEO, if your board of directors is thinking, again, I'm going to pick on SAP or Oracle. I've been running the same SAP for 20 years and it's terrific. Well, guess what? It's not. SAP's got new products. Oracle's got new products. They are different than taking the old Oracle or old SAP and moving it over to the cloud. The infrastructure as a service level of the cloud is interesting and maybe has a lot of value for companies with bad infrastructure, but it does not give you these benefits that accrue to a real SaaS product. And so if you're going to put in a SaaS product, don't put in piecemeal SaaS. Go look for something like this. And recognize if you want to build it yourself, it's certainly possible. The SaaS world allows for an awful lot of integration, but recognize you're going to have a set of costs coming up in this. The acceleration economy that we're entering is a time of rapid change, rapid next normal. Are we working from home? Are we working from somewhere else? Are we working here and there, working on this product, working for this customer? Are they coming into our restaurant? Are they coming to pick it up? Are we delivering it to them? It's funny. The world I'm in here, it's about faster and faster and faster delivery. Well, the other day, one of the home food delivery companies said, forget faster. We have another service. If you want to buy from an iconic American restaurant, I'm from New York, so in New York, it's delis and bagels. There is a deli in New York that will sell food delivered through one of these online delivery companies, or bagels delivered in 4 days. So here we are going faster, faster, faster. But somebody said, hang on a minute, there's a different product in a different market, and I can compete that way. So the acceleration economy says you've got to be thinking faster than your competitors. In the US, again, we had a pizza chain, Domino's Pizza, whose market value skyrocketed because they were the leader in mobile app and in-home delivery, even before the pandemic. There's a restaurant chain here that evaluated how customers wanted to operate when they were in a hurry for lunch. And so they sent their CEO and their CIO, and they sat in restaurants and looked, and they transformed the way they handled orders to go and got huge market share advantages from that. So the acceleration economy says you've got to be able to move fast, and you got to be able to move faster than who? Well, there's the rivals you know about, your competitors, the people you probably talk about every day. There's people in adjacent markets. If you operate in this part of the world, who does the same thing in a different part of the world? If you do this and you make this kind of widget, What other kind of widget can there be? And so you got to ask yourself, who are the obvious competitors? But then who are the non-obvious competitors? We always use the examples of Uber and Airbnb. And by the way, for those of you who think there's a lot of technology in either of those companies, there's not. I describe them as lobbying firms or law firms rather than technology companies because the tech is relatively simple. How do I post listings and have people get apartments? How do I dispatch cars to people when drivers are wanting to come and go? The key is they changed a regulation or a law or a custom. Cabs have to have taxi medallions. They have to have yellow paint on them. They have to be driven by firms with certain certification and certain insurance. Uber argued, no, they don't. So by the way, anytime there's an opportunity to exploit a hole in a regulation, anytime there's an opportunity to exploit a place where there's friction in the system, you have the opportunity to apply technology to solve that problem. And that's exactly what Uber and Airbnb did. There's also Amazon, of course. Amazon sells stuff. But I argue that Amazon really isn't in the stuff business. They're in the business of building technology, and they needed a way to fund that. Just like Elon Musk has a Tesla, and he has SpaceX, and he has other companies. His goal is to get to Mars. And so these are means to an end. And when you're looking at your competition, if somebody has a means to an end and you're competing with them, that puts you at a disadvantage. Again, in the US, we have Tesla with an insane market cap, but Rivian, the company that has sold, I think, 63 cars to employees and has no chance of making a profit indefinitely, just went public this week. The market cap was $126 billion. Higher than the market cap of General Motors by 30-something%, Ford by 50-something%, because they're seen as the future. When you're competing with somebody that competes, that sees the future and the market values that, what do? And one of the things I'll argue that you as an IT person can bring to your CEO and board is, how do I get looked at as a tech company in addition to what I do? Tell everybody a quick story. I had a client that said, we make widgets. We make a particular widget used in a heavy industry, highly regulated, to measure something that if it goes wrong, stuff blows up and people can get injured. So we sell this widget, and we're selling a new generation. Help us with an ERP system to better make and sell our product. And I said to the vendor, hey, where does this information go? This is measuring thousands and thousands of data points in a highly regulated industry. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, when you collect data, what happens? He goes, well, the customer does whatever they want. And I said, what if you collected all the data for them and built an industry dashboard? What if you could take all that data and say to a particular client, your system is in the top 5% of the parameters, the safety parameters in the industry or the geography or whatever. And they could then show that to their investors, to their regulators, to their board. Conversely, what if you were in the lowest 5%? Wouldn't you want to know that? This is a safety set of indicators. Wouldn't you want to know you're the least safe or least efficient or least reliable? I sure would if I was running that business. And I was literally, during the pandemic, I put on a suit twice. This was one of those times. I got in my car, I drove 3 hours to a board meeting. They were all on TV screens, by the way. I was in their boardroom. And I tried to persuade this group of people my age and older who'd been building machines for all these years that they should think about the data component, which, by the way, has a gross margin in the 90% versus the machinery business that's 26%. And they looked at me and they said, you don't understand, son. We sell stuff. And that was the end of that project, and never got the order to transform their business. But that's the kind of thing that your CEOs should be hearing from you as technology leaders, that there are places where maybe they haven't figured out they can compete. In the US, 50 years ago, a gentleman named Walter Wriston, who was the organizer of Citibank, from a little New York bank to Citibank, said, information about money is as valuable as the money itself. I actually heard him say that when I was a very young kid in New York City. Investment banks took that to heart, and that's why they have the margins and the scale and the scope they do. Financial services companies largely recognize that. I will argue that a lot of manufacturers, a lot of construction companies, a lot of logistics companies do not think that way. And so there's so many opportunities to raise that level and get into the acceleration economy and outcompete your rivals. 2 points to leave you with. The first one is that cloud done right, and I emphasize done right, remember fake clouds and all the other ways to do it wrong, for any size firm, for any maturity firm, powers your digital transformation and your digital optimization. A point here. Remember when I told you about the mainframes being $100 million in today's dollars? If you were a small company, you couldn't compete with technology. You had a Texas Instruments tape programmable calculator, and they had a $100 million building. Well, the cloud did something that is important depending on where you are in the maturity and size scale. If you are a $5 million company, $500,000 company, a $50 million company, now you can have the very same technology that's available to the biggest competitors, the biggest firms in the world. But I'll tell you this, you have an advantage over them. Big firms that can afford $100 million and more IT investments move very slowly. Many layers of approval, many layers of decision making. It just tires you out listening to them. I have a prospect I've been working on literally 15 months now, and the assignment is to help them figure out how to move faster. And it's so far 15 months and counting while they figure out what the engagement might look like someday. By the time I get the order, I'm just going to tell them, don't do what you did to hire me. But that's another story. So as a smaller company, you've now got the same advantage of technology that your big competitors have, but you have the opportunity to use it more quickly, to use it more deeply into your environment. So it's very important that cloud by itself, done wrong especially, is not a great idea. You can waste a lot of money doing cloud badly, and we can talk about that sometime. So that's the message for the tech folks in the audience. But the real important message is not the message for you tech folks. I say that as a tech folk, right? The real message has to reach people who don't often see this and don't often hear this. The CEO and the board of your company must accept responsibility. They cannot fob it off on a consultant. They cannot fob it off on the CIO or CDO or CTO. They've got to say, it is my responsibility as the leader of the firm to properly use technology. Now, do I need them to know how to program? No. Do I need them to know why ML and AI and fully homomorphic encryption work? No. I don't want them to know that. That's why they have experts. I don't expect them to know the arcana of international tax either, but they have to understand that tax consequences are there and real. And we got to get away from having our executives afraid of this and saying, we'll just go to the consultant or we'll just go to the IT person. They must properly use technology to drive true digital transformation. As a reminder, that's culture, markets, products, employee experience, and customer experience. Those are not the province of IT leaders. Those are the province of your business leaders. And so I'll make one more challenge because I think this audience is largely technical. Are the people watching and listening ready and willing and able to step up to having that conversation? I have seen too many IT people unable to have the business conversation with their board, with their CEO, to say, here is a business opportunity. Why aren't we seizing it? So I'm going to challenge all of you. If you're not ready to have this kind of discussion with your board, with your CEO, with every C-suite executive in your company, go figure this out. Learn how to tell the story, learn how to sell the message, and you'll be able to build an environment where the acceleration economy is not something to be feared, it's something to be embraced, because you'll be able to move faster than your competitors. And that's the future of technology and business. Thank you, everybody.